Actions allow you to trigger requests and make layout changes, element changes, and value changes when the user does something in your app. In this lesson, we're going to cover how to create a new action and how to set up action triggers. To create a new action, click on the Create New Action button. Then choose a name for your action, for example, My First Action. From the dropdown, select the action target, and finally, configure actions. When it comes to configuring your actions, you have a lot of flexibility. With onClick and onChange, the app will listen to the user's input. For example, we can put an event listener on a button, so when that button gets clicked by a user, we can choose what happens. We can perform a request, we can set a variable, set a cookie, or send the user to another page. The next items in the dropdown are Set Visibility, Set Style, Set Class, Set Text, and Set Input. These settings allow you to change the visual appearance of your target element. The option Add Parameter to Link lets you add a query parameter to a link. We can create query parameters in our Page Data panel, and we can use them across our whole app. Next, we have the Render List option. The Render List option allows you to render a list of items from a request. And finally, we have the Set HTML Attribute option, which allows you to set additional attributes to your elements. Let's get practical now and show how we can render a list of items from Airtable within our app. Note that to do anything with Airtable, you first have to do a few steps which we covered in the previous videos. First, you need to add Wized Attributes to your Webflow project, then you need to add Airtable to My Apps, and finally, you need to create a data in request that gets a list of items from Airtable. Once you have all of that ready, then you can make your first action. When rendering a list, there's one more step that we have to take. We need to go to our Page Data panel and create an Iterator variable. To do that, simply create a new variable by clicking on the plus sign over here, and you can name it anything you want, but in this case, I'm gonna call it Iterator. Later on, I'm going to show you why we need it and I'll explain how it works. But for now though, let's head over to our Actions panel. First, let's create a new action and we're gonna give it a name. In this case, I'm going to call it Render List. Then I'm going to set a target. This element will serve as a template when rendering the list of items. You can think of it sort of like a CMS item in Webflow before you add the dynamic fields. Once we selected our target element, we're going to go to the configuration settings where we're going to choose Render List from the dropdown. In the Render List data field, I have to choose an array from which the list is going to be rendered. In this case, it's the first item in my request. Finally, I have to select a variable for the index. Here, I'll simply select our Iterator variable, which we declared earlier. Now if we hit save and we re-render our canvas, we are going to see that our template item got duplicated several times. Awesome! Now we just have to replace the content. To do that, we have to create a new action for every field we have to change. I'm going to change only the heading. So in this case, I'm going to call the action Change Heading, and I'm going to apply it to the heading of our item. In the configuration settings, I'll select Set Text. And finally, I'll choose Plain Text under the Text Type option. Now the last thing I have to do here is select the field from which we're going to get the text for our heading. In this case, I want to use the headline field. So I'm going to find this field inside of our request and I'm going to select it. Then I'm going to replace this number 0 here with our Iterator variable. Now, what is this Iterator variable and why do we need it? The Iterator variable will automatically increment with each item that's being rendered, which means that the first item will have the heading number 0, right here. The second item will have the heading number 1. The third item will have a heading number 2, and so on. So basically, if we hit save now, all of our items should be rendered correctly. Oh damn, it's not working. Well, that's because we have to re-render the canvas, just like we did before. Once we do that, we can see that we're successfully rendering a list and that all of the headings are in the right place. And that's the end of the tutorial. Now let's sum up what we just learned here. Actions allow you to listen to events, and when those events happen, you can perform layout, element, and value changes in your app. And we learned how to render a list of items by setting up an iterator variable and configuring a render list action. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.